Hello and welcome to today's video where we're going to be talking about therapy and all the therapy tools and things that they tell us to do to heal ourselves and fix ourselves in the spirituality, self-help, personal growth world, and why we can be doing all the things and following all the programs and doing what everyone says we should be doing and not feeling better, right? Because again, remember the whole point of why we do our work, why we do the therapy, why we do the self-help, why we do the personal growth, why we do the spiritual stuff. The point of it is to help us feel more centered, to feel more joy, to feel more purpose, to be more connected to our humanity, to be more connected to our communities, and to be more connected to reality itself so that we can be living in a way that feels good for us and that is also good for the world around us, right? That it's not just about navel gazing and trying to make our own lives perfect. It's about feeling better in our own skin, feeling better in our own lives, supporting ourselves in the ways that we can, and then also figuring out where we fit in kind of the grand scheme of the world and how we can be of positive influence there as well, right? So both of these things. That's why we do this. We're not doing it to try to be perfect. We're not doing it to try to transcend the human condition, where we no longer have emotions, or we no longer have fears or doubts, where we no longer go through challenges and struggles, or where we heal absolutely everything in our body or everything in our minds and we're at this like perfect transcended place. That is never going to happen. Part of true spirituality and true personal growth work is starting to realize from our adult perspective that life is never going to be perfect, that we are never going to be perfect, that we are never going to get to a state of transcendence, and that that is not what is required to feel good. Okay? That we can feel good, we can feel safe, we can have our needs met to the degree that we can within the reality of our experience. Okay? So how to accept whole life experience? This is part of it, is that we are doing this self-love work where we are processing our pain and processing the trauma we've been through, the adverse experiences, the times where we were out of control and didn't get our needs met and all of this. We're processing that. We're holding ourselves through it. We're learning how to get our needs met a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more every day, so that we can come into this adult perspective of realizing that perfection is not what is required for feeling good. Okay, this is why most of us can't accept our experience. Is because we still believe in order for me to feel good, everything has to be perfect. I have to be perfect, the world has to be perfect, all pain has to be taken away. And the more we can process and then find our alignment with reality, which is going to make us feel better, the more we are going to realize that better is enough. That we can feel good, we can have joy, we can have pleasure, and we can enjoy that within the hard stuff. That it's not black and white, right? It's coming out of that childhood belief that if everything isn't perfect, nothing is, into the reality that nothing is ever going to be perfect. So we find the pleasure and we find the joy in what we can. We find the satisfaction in what we can. We find our empowerment in what we can. And then we learn how to love and soothe and support ourselves within the things that aren't perfect that we can't change. That's all it is. That's what being an adult is. And hopefully, that's what our self-help, spirituality, and personal growth, our therapy, is working us towards. So if it's TLDR to TLDL, too long didn't listen, that's the point of this video. That's the message. If your therapy, self-help, spirituality, personal growth work is not helping you process to the degree where you can come into your adult perspective and view reality from this realistic place, that nothing is ever going to be perfect, but that we can find joy and satisfaction and safety and comfort within what's not perfect, so that we're working on finding our empowerment to change the things we need to change and that we can change, that will improve our experience, while also learning to nourish and comfort and support ourselves within the things we can't change. That is probably why it's not working, right? If it's not helping you get there, it's not really helping. Okay? So we're going to talk a little today about more specifically why doing all the therapy, self-help, personal growth stuff might not work specifically. Okay? Because there are like some specific things I want you to look out for when you're doing your personal growth work, your self-help, your therapy, whatever it is that you're doing, to help you identify, is this really supporting me? Or is it not? Okay? So the first thing that I want you to recognize about why doing all the things might not be working is that there may not have been a time and a place where whoever you're working with or whatever you're working with to try to make your life better walked you through a period of time where you are simply being validated in the pain that you experienced, in the ways your caregivers failed you, in the ways that your pain is not your fault, and you are being supported in processing the stuff that happened to you that you didn't choose, that you wouldn't choose, that isn't your fault, that was never your fault, and that caused you harm. Okay? This is what a lot of the spirituality, personal growth, self-help people call going into victim mentality. And they demonize it. And this is because they do not understand. Like, at this point, I'm not tiptoeing around it. I used to try to be gentle. I get it, right? It's hard to accept that we live in a world where we do not have full control. It is hard to accept that we live in a world where shitty things can happen to us that absolutely affect us for the rest of our lives, that hurt, that hold us back from what we could have been and what we could have done, that dramatically impact us, that we didn't choose. But if we try to ignore that reality, the only other option is to go into a state of self-blame and shame and criticism over things that we didn't do to ourselves and results we're experiencing because of things we didn't choose. And that only keeps us stuck in pain. Okay? That I'm going to take full responsibility for myself and believe that I chose my parents before life and believe that I chose my life and I blah, 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 and everything that's horrible is for my own good, and what did I do to cause it, and how can I change myself so that it never happens again, and blah, blah, blah. That is what people who don't understand what real empowerment is think empowerment is. But that is not empowerment. That is shame, blame, and guilt, and that is the childhood reasoning coping mechanism coming in and being painted as a spiritual idea, painted as a taking of responsibility, when really it's completely disconnected from reality. You did not choose your caregivers. You did not have control over how much they did or did not meet your needs. And you did not have control over how them not meeting your needs or harming you in some way affected you. You did not choose the body you were born into. You did not choose the country you were born into and the conditions of your education, of your safety, of the neighborhood you grew up in, of the friends around you, of the cultural conditioning, of what was right and what was wrong and what was good and what was bad. You didn't choose any of that. And the effects of those things are long-ranging. And if we don't acknowledge that we were absolutely victims in that, we did not have control. None of us chose that. That is the literal definition of being a victim. If we can't acknowledge that, we are never going to be able to figure out how we can actually support ourselves in the present to feel better from what happened. Okay? The metaphor I like to use is this. It's like being born and your caregivers put your hand on a burner. So now your flesh is being singed. It's being damaged, it's being hurt, it's being harmed. And you are naturally going to respond with pain. And rather than your caregivers going, oh shit, we are doing something wrong, rather than society or culture or your other authority figures being able to say, oh shit, we're doing something wrong. This child is in pain. They're crying out for help. They're yelling, they're screaming, their hand is burning. They go, you are the problem. The fact that you are crying out in pain, that's the problem. You need to learn to stop that. The fact that you are in pain is the problem. We need to fix your hand so it stops being in pain. That's how most of us grew up. And we think taking responsibility for ourselves means, how do I figure out how to keep my hand on the burner and not have pain? How do I figure out how this pain is my fault so I can change myself? So I can change myself so that I don't have a pain reaction anymore to my hand being on the burner. And that's the solution to my problem. That is what spiritual people call taking responsibility for yourself. No. That is not taking responsibility for yourself. Because there is no way that you are going to change yourself enough so that you can hold your hand on a burner and it's not destroying your tissue. That is impossible. There is no way that getting to a point where holding your hand on a burner and stopping yourself from screaming out in pain or stopping yourself from experiencing pain, maybe you take a bunch of painkillers or you cut your own hand off or something like this, that's not a solution. But that's what spiritual people saying, take responsibility for yourself, are doing. What needs to happen is me to validate. My hand being on this burner feels bad. It hurts. I cry out in pain because it hurts. Because, again, our conditioning says the hand is supposed to be on the burner. And it's my reaction that's the problem. No. So by going through that phase of validating, wait, maybe there's a reason I'm crying out in pain. Maybe there's a reason I'm in pain. Maybe the pain isn't the problem, but the pain is the pointing out what the problem is. That's when we start to say, wait a minute, maybe having my hand on the burner isn't the right thing. That's what my caregivers taught me to do. And then they taught me how to be silent while my hand was on the burner. And then they yell at me every time I scream out. So now I think the problem with me is that I scream out. And I need to take responsibility for that and stop screaming out. That's the childhood coping mechanism. Real reality is, no, your caregivers were wrong for teaching you to put your hand on a burner. And now you need, as an adult, to take your hand off the burner. To break up with your conditioning. And the only way we're going to be able to discover that is through validating ourselves first. So if your therapy, self-help, personal growth, spirituality is trying to skip to, what can you do about it? So long as you've never gone through the validation process, you're not even going to be aware that your hand is on a burner and it shouldn't be. You're going to be stuck in trying to fix the fact that you call out. Trying to fix the fact that you're in pain, which was never the problem. Because you are going to continue to perceive that that's the problem. So long as you're still trying to fix yourself, you're still in this idea of, if I perfect myself, if I change this thing that made my caregivers reject me, I will be happy, I will be free. If I get completely away from them and I fully become independent, or I fully become what they wanted me to become, or I'm successful in my career, or I change my body in some way, I will be perfect, I will be safe, pain will stop happening. That's your childhood coping mechanism. That's not reality. So that's the first thing. If your therapy, self-help, personal growth work is not starting with, where are you in pain? How are you coping? Let's look at your self-sabotage. Let's look at your coping mechanisms. Let's look at your bad habits. Let's look at your emotions that you have. Let's look at the way you cry out for help. Let's look at the way that you're attached or anxiously attached or codependent or a people pleaser or an avoidant. And let's figure out where these patterns came from. What hurt you? Where did you learn that this is what you had to do? Where was your environment not safe and not supportive? Where did you not get your needs met? How were you harmed? Where's the indoctrination and the misalignment with real reality that came with your religion, your education, the way your caregivers raised you? We have to deal with that first. And that requires being validated in our anger, validated in our pain, validated in our emotions, and not trying to solve things right away. Not going into, okay, well, what can I do about it? We don't know that yet. Because we haven't figured out what the source of the pain is yet. So if your self-help, personal growth, therapy, self-improvement, whatever it is not starting with validation and helping you see that your pain is not your fault, that you are not just choosing to be shitty with your bad habits, that you are not the reason why all the pain in your life is happening. It's not helping you see where your patterns came from. It's not working. That's the first key. If we're not starting with validation, we are never going to see where your actual power is. You are always going to think from the childhood perspective that if I fix myself, I can fix my reality, which is not an adult perspective. Right? Literally, new thought is the childhood perspective. If I just perfect my vibration or perfect my thoughts or perfect my actions and my words and do everything perfect, mommy universe and daddy universe will bless me with only the things that I need and will take all my pain away. No, it won't. It's never going to happen. It's the childhood perspective. You cannot perfect yourself enough to never be in pain again. But you can learn to validate your pain, figure out where it's actually coming from, and then figure out from your adult perspective what you can do about it. But we have to start with validation. We don't problem solve first. And if we try to skip the validation part, we are never going to see the full reality, and we are going to be stuck in coping mechanisms forever. Okay? So that's the first reason it might not be working. If you're not being validated, if you're being told you should feel a different way, if you're being told to take responsibility for shit that is not your responsibility, that you did not choose, that you did not create, it's not going to work. You're going to stay stuck in a childhood perspective, and the person you're working with is stuck in a childhood perspective. Okay? Second thing. The second thing that can be missing, that can make it so that our therapy, self-help, personal growth doesn't work, is that it's all in our head and not in our bodies. A lot of our spirituality, self-help, personal growth is about thinking different. And we truly believe that if I understand my pattern and I understand my trauma and I've read all the books and I've listened to all the lectures and I know that the body keeps the score and I've done all the thinking, trying to convince myself to believe different things. If it's all in your head and none of it is happening on a physical level, you're not learning how to be with your emotions, how to feel them all the way through, how to observe them and watch them, how to have space, learning how to watch your emotions rise and fall. Learning to watch as your thoughts tell you, if I do this, everything's going to fall apart. And then doing it anyways, and actually feeling that it works out okay. If you're not learning to orient to your real lived reality, but you're continually being stuck in your loops of thought because you don't know how to get into your body. If you think you can think your way out of all of your trauma, if you think you can reason your way out of all of the things that are going on with you, you're going to get stuck. Okay? We are a culture that is obsessed with the mind. We are obsessed with thinking. We are obsessed with logic. And so many of us now, and this is a big problem, okay, this is something I see over and over and over again, is so many of us are so consciously aware of trauma and childhood trauma and complex PTSD and patterns and why these things are the way they are and capitalism and the way that the world works and all of this stuff. We're so aware. And we think that should be enough, right? We think, I know all this stuff. I understand all this stuff. I get my patterns. I know why I'm doing it. But we're not doing anything on a physical level. We're not actually learning how to be with an emotion and not respond to it and see that we can be okay. We're not learning to physically bring ourselves into a state of safety where safety does exist. We're not learning how to take different steps than our patterns want us to take and feeling the fear of that, doing it anyways, and then feeling that we didn't die on the other side. We're just stuck living in our heads. We're stuck in the what ifs, we're stuck in the stories, we're stuck in the trauma brain versus the educated brain, and they're just at war all the time because we're not doing anything somatic. If your therapist, your coach, your guide isn't helping you, go back to these painful things that you've been through and feel them in your body, and then walking you through a process of coming back into your adult perspective and staying in your witness self so that you don't get totally sucked into it, and seeing that you're not there anymore on a physical level. If they're not helping you create practices in your day-to-day life that make you feel good in your day-to-day life, it's not going to work. If it's all in your head and it's all theory, okay, I want you to think of it like this. Who would you rather have fly you in a plane? A person who has read every book on how to fly a plane, but has never sat in the cockpit? Or a person who's never read any book, but has flown 2,000 flights? Who do you want to fly you in a plane? My guess is you want the person who has flown the 2,000 flights. Why? Because you know that book knowledge and actual practice are two very different things. Now, is book knowledge bad? No. Do we not want to read? Do we not want to read the textbook? Do we not want to figure that out? Of course not. That knowledge is important. The head knowledge is important. But if it is not combined with physical practice and experience, it's not going to change anything. You are a whole being with a body and emotions. You're not just a head walking around. And the next most important thing about this is learning to discern where your false perceptions and your conditioning are versus what actual reality is going to come from your feelings, not from your logic. Because your mind can be convinced that anything is true. If I give you enough evidence and cover enough evidence, I can convince you that the sky is orange. That's how our minds work. If we're given enough evidence and we're hidden from enough evidence, we can convince the mind that anything is true. And then tied in with this, our perception filter machine works in a very specific way. That when we start to take on a belief, which is usually going to happen in our childhoods, our core foundational beliefs that we believe about ourselves and the world come very early in life. So we can be convinced that this is who I am. This is my worth. This is my value. This is my likability and lovability. These are the rules I have to follow to be a good person. These are the things I'm not allowed to do. All of this. And that stuff can be totally out of alignment with real reality. It can have nothing to do with who you really are. It can be totally out of alignment with what's actually healthy, right? We look around the world and we sometimes see people just doing things all day long, thinking, how can you possibly think that that's a reasonable way to live? Like, we can see that that's not right. How can they not see it? Because they're not feeling, and they're working from their head that is convinced of this. And then, when we are convinced of these ideas, the way that our perception machine works, like I was saying, is that it starts to filter out information that would have us see reality in a different way. And it starts to highlight only the information that supports what we already believe. So it's a double whammy. We take on beliefs without realizing we're taking them on, because we take them on so early in life. They become our blueprint for who we are and how the world works. And then our minds literally go about looking for the evidence to support that, filtering out anything that doesn't support that, so that we continue to believe, yeah, but I believe this for a reason because it's true, because look at all my evidence. This is why we need the body. When you think a thought that feels terrible in your body, it feels contracting, it feels like it's shutting you down, it feels heavy, it feels hard, it feels shitty, it feels nauseous, it feels gunky, that's our sign that either part of that thought isn't true, what we're making that thought mean isn't true, or the thought itself is just not true. Now, that does not necessarily mean that the opposite of the thought is true. Okay, this is where a lot of us get caught up. We think, okay, well, if it's not true that I need to be ultra productive in order to be safe, then that means I can just do nothing. Well, obviously that's not true. So I need to stay being ultra productive even though that feels like shit. This is where most of us get caught up. Because we think, okay, this thought, I need to be ultra productive and doing things 24/7 in order to be safe. You think that thought and it doesn't feel good, even though you have all this evidence that makes you believe that it's true. So we go, okay, I'm willing to believe that maybe it's not true, and there's something else that might be true. But then we think, okay, I don't have to work to be safe. And then that thought doesn't feel good. And we think, well, then the first thought must be true. No. There's nuance. There's complexity. We need to keep searching and digging and looking for that third way, the middle ground, the adult perspective that helps us find reality. There's a reasonable level of productivity that I can engage in that will help me have enough where I don't have to be burning myself out all the time. Right? Or we might be saying, well, if I'm not ultra productive, that means I will always be stuck in pain. So when we try to say to ourselves, I don't have to be ultra productive, that thought doesn't feel good because we're making it mean that if I'm not ultra productive, I won't be okay. I'm going to be in pain forever. And that's what feels bad about it. So it's not that the thought, I don't have to be ultra productive, is true because it feels bad. Or it's not that the thought, I don't have to be ultra productive, is false because it feels bad. It feels bad because of what we're making that thought mean. So we have to go deeper than just, well, if it feels good because I think it's good, and if it feels bad, the opposite is true, and then if the opposite doesn't feel good, then that's just, I go with my original thought. Okay? It's complex. Thought work and feeling work is not as simple as just feel your feeling and then that's it. We have to investigate. We have to learn how to question our thoughts. We have to learn how to question our perspectives. Go deeper than the surface level. What am I making this mean? And then what? And why is that scary? And where did this come from? And could there be a third way that isn't just the opposite of this thought that is true? It's not just, okay, I'm thinking a thought, it's not true, so the opposite is true. That's not how reality works. There's probably a nuance. So this is why, if we're doing this work and there's no physical component to it, it's not going to work. Because changing how we feel doesn't happen in our heads. It happens in our bodies. Nervous system work is the work that needs to be done. Nervous system work. Learning to orient and feeling safety where safety actually exists. learning to watch your emotions without reacting and responding to them right away, so we can get clarity first. Learning to feel what it feels like to do something different, right? Having to actually practice doing something different, not just knowing something different, but doing it and feeling the fear and feeling how it doesn't feel good right away and doing it anyways and practicing that. And then using our feelings as guides. Learning how to feel how a thought actually feels and what we're making that thought mean. And finding thoughts that feel better than the ones that feel like shit, so that we can actually get through our programming and conditioning. Because our minds can be convinced of anything, but our bodies will always tell us when something is untrue, or when what we're making it mean is untrue. Okay? So those two things. And the last thing I'm going to bring up today is we're not practicing. We're not practicing practices. All of us, again, most of us have this tendency of, okay, I learned it. I learned the theory. Great, now what? What's the next thing? What's the next thing to understand? What's the next book to read? What's the next bit of information I need? We just keep thinking that if I get enough information and I read enough books and I listen to enough podcasts and I do enough therapy sessions and I go on enough ayahuasca retreats and do enough yoga, it's going to work one day, right? And if it's not working, I just need more information. I need more thing. I need more theory, more books, more retreats, more drugs. Healing is going to happen when we learn to start to integrate our understandings into daily practices. Right? So when we learn, for instance, the concept of shame, blame, and guilt are always lies, we can understand that. Right? When I'm in that state of self-blame and assuming everything is my fault and shaming myself that I'm not good enough, or I'm not productive enough, or I'm not doing enough, or I'm not good enough, I can have a conscious awareness, okay, that's probably not real reality. But if you don't actually practice, okay, whoa, I'm shaming myself right now. I can witness that. And now I'm going to do the actual work to investigate. What is this shame thought hiding? If this is not my fault, if I am not to blame, if I am not bad and wrong, what am I actually feeling? Am I angry at my caregivers for letting me down? Am I sad that someone left me or abandoned me and I'm making it my fault? Am I scapegoating not being productive enough onto not feeling safe? And why do I not feel safe? We need to practice the things we know. I have been getting up and doing meditation, so breathing exercises, questioning my thoughts, questioning my perceptions, questioning my shame stories for over a decade, every single day. That's why this worked for me. Because it's not just a theory I talk about. It's not just something I understand in my mind. I get up and I do the work every day. This stuff is like going to the gym. If you understand how to lift weights, if you've read all the books about proper technique and proper form, You're completely educated, but you don't go to the gym every day, you are not going to build muscle. If you only go to the gym when you feel like going to the gym, your results are not going to be that great. If you only go to the gym every time you have a health scare, it's not going to change anything. You have to go every day. You have to do a practice every day. You have to meet yourself where you're at right now and do something about it every day. You have to interrogate your thoughts every day. You have to practice compassion for yourself every day. You have to actually work the tools. The tools are not going to work if you don't use them. This is the thing that I see a lot of people missing, is they're not willing to just sit and do the simple thing over and over and over and over and over again. Everybody wants what's next. Everybody wants, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? I want to move on. You're not ready to move on from the validation phase until you really feel like you are not bad and you are not broken. You have your shame, blame, or you have your coping mechanisms, you have your self-sabotage, you have your scapegoats, and all of that is totally innocent. You see where it came from. You have compassion for yourself. Now you're ready to start. Maybe practicing, witnessing yourself and doing something different and seeing how it feels. Okay? It takes time. It takes practice. Regulating our nervous systems every day. Choosing better thoughts every day. Getting mad at your caregivers and writing about it in your journal every day until you feel like you don't need to anymore. We can't just do it when we're having a meltdown. We can't just do it when we're in a crisis. We can't just do it whenever we feel like it. If we don't make our practices and our new awarenesses a part of our everyday routine, they can't change us. So if it's not turning into daily new habits, it's likely not going to do anything for you. If you're not working your tools every day, they aren't going to work. And then if you get to a point where you're working your tools for such a long time that it's still not working, like you've really put in the effort, you've done it for like 3 months or 6 months and it's not helping you feel better, that's when you need to say, okay, maybe this practice isn't helpful. Maybe this isn't what I need right now. Maybe I need something else. You got to practice it for a while to be able to see the results. And if you don't get results, then you look for something new. And if you do get results, what's going to happen is you will eventually get to a place where you're ready for the next thing. And then it will come into your awareness. You'll find it. You'll be ready for it. You'll seek it out. You'll know it's time, because the next thing will likely just come into your reality. You won't be like, okay, well, I know this now, so get to the next thing. It will be a natural transition, because you've gotten the results from what you've been doing already. You'll know you're ready to start lifting 40 pounds when 20 pounds gets too easy. You don't need to do that anymore. You've built enough muscle that 20 pounds is easy, breezy. You can do that in your sleep, right? You can do your meditation practice in your sleep. You can do your thought work in your sleep. You can catch a negative thought and turn it into a more empowering one easily. That's when you're ready for the next thing. And then you practice that over and over and over again until it becomes your new normal. When the results become your new normal, then you're ready for the next step. Because you've practiced so much that it's become your new normal. Okay? So to sum up, if your therapy, self-help, personal growth work isn't starting with validation and figuring out how you are innocent and where you were hurt and it was not your fault, where all your shame, blame, and guilt stories are coming from, and how that's your childhood coping mechanism, not real reality, it's not going to work. Second, if it's all in your head, if it's all theory and no practice, it's not going to work. If it's not in your body, if it's not somatic, if it's not somatic processing, if there isn't any emotional release happening, and again, remember, this shouldn't be big and dramatic and over the top and out of control and re-traumatizing. This needs to be done in a safe environment where you're being able to stay in your witness perspective, where you don't fully lose yourself to it, where you're guided and supported so that you can have a completion with it. Like at the end, you don't feel like you're just stuck in your trauma or you're stuck in that childhood trapped feeling, but you've actually come through it back into your adult perspective and you feel grounded and safe again, then it's just re-traumatizing you. So be careful of that. You need someone to teach you how to do this in a way where you stay in control, where you feel it without getting lost in it. And then you need to practice your practices. It's not enough to just understand these things. It's not enough to know it. You have to practice. You have to do these things on a daily basis. You have to take what you understand and you have to apply it over and over and over and over and over again. And you don't move on until what you're currently practicing becomes your new normal. So is it your new normal to catch yourself when you're in shame or you're in your coping mechanism and to say, wait, what's really going on here? If it's not, you're not ready for the next thing yet. You have to practice this. And talking about it isn't going to do it. You can talk about it and 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 talk about it. But if you're not practicing it, it doesn't matter. Okay? Okay. So that's all I have for you today. I hope that was helpful and clarifying and supportive. Take your time. Do not rush. Practice your practices. Feel it in your body. Start from a place of compassion, not fixing. That is how we heal. Getting your needs met is how you are going to heal. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. Okay? Okay. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. You are not broken. One step at a time. All right. I'll see you next week.